Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. Today I'm joined by Elijah Gizzareli, who is running for Governor of Rhode Island as a Libertarian. Elijah, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for giving me your time. I know it's quite a tight schedule heading into election night. It's a little less than 4 weeks, I believe, 24 days to be exact. So yeah, I really appreciate you giving me your time for this. My first question, it's a bit of a general one. Why do you want to be Governor of Rhode Island?
Because I'm not happy with the other options, frankly. I mean, look, guys, if you look around the state, Rhode Island hasn't been run well for a long time. And there's just so many common sense issues that we could just fix right off the bat. And nobody's doing it. Nobody's talking about it. And Rhode Island, we tax way too much. We spend way too much of taxpayers' money. And our budget is still ridiculous. We're spending 13 billion and we're only taking in 5 and change, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. Sorry about that. My sound blocker there fell in front of the camera. But yeah, so it's just absolutely ridiculous where like even the Republican is just talking about how much money she wants to spend. Like, think about it. If you watch that debate and you were hosting it, great job, by the way, right? All she's ever talking about is being more generous with your money, right? Nothing about fiscal conservatism ever leaves her mouth, right? And libertarianism, we just say, listen, as a society, we don't need the government to do everything. And the more money we funnel through the government, the worse we're all off, really. Like the government doesn't have anything. It doesn't produce anything. So it just mismanages other people's money. And then they say, oh, look at McKee, right? During the debate, he's talking about, oh, well, we like acting like this is something he's done that's so generous. He's like, we put 150 million towards this. That's your money. And he's taking credit for it, right? It's ridiculous. And so I really wanted to get out there and just kind of spout out these common sense ideas, like ending the drug war. It's fiscally, it's just common sense. We're spending money hand over fist to imprison people that have never harmed anybody. They're no threat to society. They're only, at best, a threat to themselves, right? It's a mental health problem. It's not a criminal problem. The drug war must end now. It's common sense.
And as I had mentioned in the introduction, you are running as a Libertarian candidate. I asked a similar question to Party Chair Billy Hunt, since a number of voters don't know what a Libertarian is because the two-party system just dominates a lot of the discourse. From your perspective, what does it mean to be a Libertarian?
I mean, look, if you think that people should be allowed to live their lives as long as any way they so choose, as long as they're not harming other people, you're a libertarian, right? Now it's just convincing you of it, right? And this is the problem: is that politicians in general are really like they're very good at their jobs, and their jobs is not to lead. Their jobs are not to run governments. Their jobs is to get elected, right? And so they're very good at putting a nice face on a horrible thing, right? And they're very good at tricking people and attacking your insecurities and making you think that you need the government to help you, right? In this particular, whatever your thing is, whether it's persecuting the drug war, whether it is charities and welfare. They're always trying to figure out a way where they'll say, oh, we can get these people to be insecure enough to give us their money and put us in charge, right? And so libertarians just basically say, no, like we don't need that. These guys are a bunch of racketeers. They're basically just really polished grifters. And so libertarians just want you to be able to live your life how you see fit and free from government intrusion, as long as you're not harming anybody.
I know the main goal running for governor obviously is to win and become governor in January, but for your party specifically, I know there's a target to get 5%, as you mentioned in the debate, and as Billy Hunt told me last year on the show. Can you explain for those watching why that's a goal for your candidacy?
So, look, I mean, Republicans and Democrats run the show, right? And they are private institutions. They are private organizations. Republicans and Democrats aren't any more the government than me and you, right? It just so happens that the people that get elected are part of those parties. And then they start making rules that favor their private institutions, right? So Republicans and Democrats have set rules against third parties and independents. And they've been doing it for a long, long time, right? It actually stems back from to Ross Perot, right? I think it was the '92 election when Bill Clinton got elected. He was going up against George Bush Sr. Actually, it's not senior because they have different middle names, but whatever. He's going up against the old George Bush, and and so they let Ross Perot in the debates, a third party, right? And at that time, the I forget what it was called. It was like the Women's Coalition of Voters or something. I forget exactly what it was.
Yeah, they usually were hosting the debates.
Yeah, they would host the debates, right? And they had been doing it for 25 years, right? And they let Ross Perot in the debates. Now there's some speculation that George Bush thought that Ross Perot would take votes away from Bill Clinton, so he let him in the debates, right? But either way, Ross Perot rocked the debate stage, and it lent him legitimacy. And he ended up getting 22%, even though he dropped out of the race just a couple of weeks before the election. He got 22% of the vote, and Bill Clinton won because Ross Perot, right? And so after that, Republicans and Democrats got together and they said, wow, the independent got 22%. We can never let that happen again. So then they came up with the Commission on the Presidential Debates. And if you look at it, it's seemingly innocuous companies like Boeing, I think, is on the commission, or they sponsor the commission. The commission's just their puppets, right? So it's like Boeing, it's Anheuser-Busch, there's a few other ones. Like, and you don't think of those, you just think of those as good quality American companies. They are the military-industrial complex. Boeing makes billions and billions of dollars off of war, right? Anheuser-Busch has the contract for all foreign military bases. Whenever a soldier drinks any kind of fluid on foreign soil, Anheuser-Busch gets paid for that, right? You can drink Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch gets paid for that. They have the contract. So that's why John McCain, I'm sorry, I'm going kind of like on a big tangent here. That's why John McCain's wife, she's an heiress to Anheuser-Busch. That's why he always voted yes on every single war he ever saw, right? Because he's connected to the military-industrial complex. It's deeply, deeply corrupt, right? And so they've managed to corrupt the system so that third parties and independents no longer have the ability to debate, right? And so now this is kind of the status quo, where Republicans and Democrats get together and they make sure, like, they come to an agreement. We're not going to let any third parties on this debate stage. Now, I don't know what happened, right, with the segregation in the debate previously. I assumed that it was probably like either Callis or McKee was like, no, I don't want to be on the stage with those other guys. That's why I assumed happened. But that's because it's become status quo. And as a society, we need to start standing up to this and saying, no, anybody who's on the ballot deserves to be in the debate. And that's it. And it's an unacceptable debate format otherwise. And they need to be on the stage together at the same time. That's like, it's low key, pretty disrespectful, right? When you have like a kids table stage, right? And I appreciate you guys inviting the third parties, because the other debates didn't do that, right? So that means that there are people. I'm not blaming individual people, by the way. Like, there are people like on the ground game, right? That they really tried to push for the right thing to happen.
So for the not to interrupt, but for the 5%, what would that accomplish if you get the 5%? Just for reference for those watching.
I said all of that, guys. I'm sorry. I'm a politician now, I guess.
It's okay, no worries, because you're actually bringing the background. I think I know where you're going to. I just want for them to know why you're going for 5%.
In Rhode Island, our own particular brand of corruption is that the Republicans and Democrats that make the laws in this state have decided that you cannot be considered a political party even unless you get either 5% in the governor's race or in the presidential race, right? So It's absolutely ridiculous. We're not able to operate like the Democrats and Republicans do. It ties our hands financially, and we're already at such a financial disadvantage because we don't have political favors to sell. And libertarians wouldn't sell political favors if we had them, right? And so what happens, right, is we have to jump through all these extra hoops in order just to function as a normal Democrat or Republican. And so if we get 5% in this gubernatorial race, then yes, we will actually meet that that benchmark and be considered a political party. And that said, that comes with a caveat, right? Like in New York, they needed 2.5% in the gubernatorial race to get ballot access for the state for 4 years, right? They got the 2.5%, and immediately the state Congress over there met and then changed the benchmark to 4.5%, and then cut down their benefit by 2 years. So they just, as soon as they hit, the libertarians hit the benchmark, they strip them of what they earn, right? And this is how it operates. It's a very corrupt system. Democrats and Republicans, they're incentivized to keep us down. And these are the types of ways that they do it.
So right now, nobody can actually register as a libertarian then, right? It's just they register as unaffiliated?
Correct, right? And it's kind of weird because, you know, people will be like, are you a registered libertarian? And it's like, no. Like in internal political party stuff, like some people look down on people who aren't registered libertarians. It's like, I can't. I literally cannot even register as a libertarian.
Exactly. The only options when I remember registering, it was Republican, Democrat, Independent, and unaffiliated. So let's talk some policy a bit. I know one of the things you mentioned in one of your answers was ending the drug war, which is a big piece of your campaign platform. How would you be able to accomplish that as governor?
Yeah, I was low key hoping for that question where I could squeeze that in. So I just used my my closing statement. I was right about to stick the landing and got cut off. So I'm glad. All right. So look, in Rhode Island, these are actually old numbers, right? So before COVID happened, it was said that Rhode Islanders paid $50,000 per year per inmate to just house them in the prison, right? And it was the 5th most in the nation. That's like that. And what happened is that after COVID, I've looked at the numbers, and the numbers are very difficult to find, by the way. I had to talk to like activist experts who have done FOIA requests in order to get these numbers, right? So it's now at least 71 or 72,000 per inmate per year. And that's a 50% increase almost in 2 years. It's crazy, right? And so we're spending money hand over fist to house these people, and they've never harmed anybody. Non-violent drug offenders have only ever harmed themselves. And it's insane that we're keeping them locked away. And then Rhode Island, by the way, and I'll give Dan McKee credit where credit's due. I'll never not give somebody credit for doing the right thing. Joe Biden, I can't stand 99% of his policies. A couple weeks ago, you know, he put in an order to start releasing all simple drug marijuana. I'm sorry, I can't say marijuana, and will kill me. So cannabis, all and Armstrong will kill it. Don't say marijuana. So he said all simple cannabis possessions will be released federally. That's amazing. That's really good. It's not good enough, right? He's still guilty of holding other people that have been intent to sell and other things. And intent to sell, by the way, like you don't need any real reason to stick somebody with intent to sell. It's completely arbitrary. People that have just had traces of drugs on them have been stuck with intent to sell, right? Where there's a line in Rhode Island, I think, is it's if you have more than 28 grams of any drug, right, you can get hit with manufacturing and distribution. 28 grams for some drugs is a daily amount of consumption. So you could just have a daily supply and get hit with manufacture and distribution, which is worse than a murder charge. It's absolutely insane. So yes, we have people that have never harmed anybody, only harmed themselves behind bars right now. And Dan McKee, what he has done, right, is since COVID, Rhode Island's done a good job of getting the smallest offenders, drug offenders, out of prison. Rhode Island has been pushing voting rights for felons, for people on probation, that kind of stuff. That stuff is moving in a good direction. Okay, but it's still not enough. There are still innocent people we're holding behind bars on taxpayer money. And here's the thing, we're taking these people away from their friends, we're taking them away from their families, we're taking mothers and fathers away from their sons and daughters, we're taking sons and daughters away from their mothers and fathers, we're taking them out of their jobs. So now their family's getting put on welfare, and we're spending more money to feed their family now, right? And then we're spending $70,000 a year to house them in prison, even though they haven't harmed anybody. They're not a danger to society, right? And it's like, what, we're destroying their families. Like it's absolutely, the drug war is an economic disaster and a humanitarian crisis, and it needs to end right now. So first day in office, when elected, I will release all non-violent drug offenders from the ACI and send them home with a heartfelt apology, because it's horrific what's happening right now.
How do you feel about, I feel like I know the answer. How do you feel about expungement of records for those who were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs?
Oh, if some, like, this is something that happened, right, where across the United States, people start legalizing recreational cannabis, right? And then like people are still in prison in those states, right? Like for selling or for even just possession. And it's like, what's going on here? It's like any kind of new law that gets passed, you need to be proactive and help out people, right, that have been retroactively affected. If we decide today, right, like this isn't illegal, anybody who has that on their record, that needs to go away. That should not be on your record. And by the way, felony, that the whole idea of a felon is absolutely ridiculous. We're keeping a permanent second-class citizenry in this country, right? It's the idea of a felony. If somebody's safe to be out in society and participate, they're safe to be out in society and participate. They should not be a second-class citizen. And what happens when you strap somebody with these things like felonies is that they go back to drugs, right? Because it's harder for them to find jobs. It's harder for them to improve their life situation. And they'll have this constant label put on them that they are lesser than others, right? And psychologically, that's terribly damaging. We should get rid of the entire felon system in general. So I don't know what the power, I think that felonies are kind of like this weird, like, because there's federal felonies, I don't know. So I don't know how much power the governor has over that, but I would definitely investigate it, and I would try to expunge any kind of record of felonies or anything like that off of people's records.
You're also in favor of bringing back flavored vapes. It's a bit of a controversial topic that has strong views from both sides. I remember, this is a bit anecdotal, but when I was in high school, there would be students who would vape, and I remember, I mean, it's just kind of a touchy subject. But my thoughts on it aside, I want to give you a chance to talk about it. In what ways would this help Rhode Islanders?
Well, I mean, honestly, like, I can't stand vapes, right? I'm not a big fan of nicotine or smoking. I think that vaping is probably very, very bad for you. My little sister vapes. I hope she stops. I don't like that she vapes, right? I care about her a lot. I worry for her health, right? That said, it's her choice, right? It's not my place to force my little sister to stop vaping. It's her choice. And this goes back to bodily autonomy, right? You have the ultimate decision over what happens to your body, and you should have the ultimate decision. The government keeps sticking its nose where it doesn't belong. Rhode Island is only one of 4 states nationally that has banned flavored vapes. So I've made that a sticking point in my campaign, just because I know that how many people vape here in Rhode Island, and they're politically homeless. Republicans and Democrats alike are persecuting these people, and they should be able to do what they want. Meanwhile, like, you know, people are allowed to drink, which I think, like, alcoholism is probably much more dangerous than vaping, right? Like, people are allowed to do all these other, people are allowed to eat at McDonald's. Like, if ban McDonald's before you ban flavored vapes. Like, this is crazy. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in Rhode Island, right? Ban McDonald's. Like, I'm not actually suggesting we ban McDonald's. I'm saying if you want to be so ridiculous to try to like manage people's healths for them, ban McDonald's. Then they'll say, oh, people always bring up kids. It's like, I didn't say sell vapes to children, right? People always worry that that's a thing. McDonald's is literally advertising to children. That's all of their advertisements. Like, Ronald McDonald's a clown. They give toys with their horribly unhealthy food. They get them addicted young, right? And so, like, if we're really going to be fighting for people's health, the place that you start is McDonald's, right? I don't think that we should do that. But this banning flavored vapes happened because Trump freaked out because they said that there were some toxic flavored vapes coming in from China or something. It turned out it was just like one strand of cannabis vapes that didn't even come from China or something like that. And during that whole panic, because I think like 3 people died from it, Rhode Island just passed this flavored vape ban. And so now Rhode Islanders who vape, they're driving to Connecticut. They're spending their taxpayer money over. They're not spending their they're spending their Rhode Island dollars in Connecticut, not only to buy vapes. It's bolstering Connecticut businesses, but now they're driving past casinos to go get their flavored vapes. So now they're spending money at the casino there, right? And it's taking money out of Rhode Island. And if you're an environmentalist, do you really want so many people driving, 25, 50 miles to go pick up what they should be able to get just down the street at their local store? It's ridiculous.
So it's kind of like a snowball effect. This one change happens, and then you got all these other issues rising from that one change. Let's move on to the economy. It's a big issue both nationally and locally. Things are in rough shape economically, to say the least. We're pretty much in a recession, depending on who you ask. But 2 negative GDP growth. Yeah, we are 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. That's the textbook definition. We are in a recession. But that aside, as governor, what measures would you take to try and shift the economy back in the right direction for Rhode Island, not nationally?
Look, the government breaks your leg and then they give you a crutch and they say, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be able to walk, right? And so McKee, when he talks about fixing the economy, he talks about how many government grants he gave out, how many crutches he's been handing out to people. And I say, stop breaking their legs, right? The lockdown is his fault. It's Raimondo's fault. He was the lieutenant governor during it, right? It's you forced Rhode Island small businesses closed, and then you forced us to go spend our money at these giant corporations and billionaires who've never even stepped foot in Rhode Island benefited from these policies of yours. Take responsibility for that, right? No, we shouldn't be seeing who can hand out as many crutches, right, as possible. We should be looking at how we can get out of Rhode Islanders' ways, right? Occupational licensing for most things is pretty silly. Like, you should not need a license, a hairdressing license or a cosmetology license, whatever they call it, to open up a barber shop. Right? These are businesses that low-income Rhode Islanders could be opening up and bettering their life situation. And the government is sticking their foot in front of the door and saying, no, you can't come in here unless you have so much money to put down towards this license, right? It's like, if you can cut hair, you can cut hair, right? Like use your skills, right? I want to see Rhode Islanders start. I love small businesses, right? That's one of the best things about Rhode Island. You go out west to these Midwestern places, there's just corporate parking lot after corporate parks after corporate parks, right? And there's no life force there. You come to Rhode Island, you want mom and pop shops, you want little restaurants, you don't want to go to Chili's, right? You want these small businesses to flourish. So we need to get the government out of the way. If that involves giving them tax breaks, it involves giving them tax breaks. We've destroyed the small business economy here through COVID. We need to get these people back on their feet. We need Rhode Islanders to start championing their own future. If you don't work towards your goals, somebody will pay you to work towards theirs. We shouldn't have Rhode Islanders working towards Jeff Bezos' goals. We shouldn't have Rhode Islanders working towards the owners of Walmart's goals, right? We should have Rhode Islanders working towards Rhode Islanders' goals.
Speaking of small businesses, sometimes people that are very pro small business will argue that things like raising the minimum wage will hurt those said small businesses because they wouldn't be able to afford it compared to a Walmart or Amazon, for example. Currently, we're heading to $15 an hour by the year 2025. How do you feel about that number? Should it be higher, lower?
Well, with the amount of inflation that we're seeing, I mean, a $15 wage isn't that much. That said, the minimum wage should not exist. And I will be as bold as you want. This is just something people are wrong about. If you talk to any economist and you ask them if price controls work, they will tell you no, price controls don't work. A wage is the price of your labor. So the minimum wage, what it does is it's an attack on the lowest rungs of society. It's an attack on unskilled labor, right? Where a business owner might have $10 an hour to give somebody to do a menial task just so they don't have to do it. You say it's a $15 minimum wage, now they're just going to do it themselves, right? And so that an unskilled laborer could have had that easy job. I don't know what it is, right? We'll just say a cashier at a gas station, right? Like they could have had that job. They could have learned skills inside the workforce and improved their situation, earned raises, learned better skills, and eventually gotten much higher than a minimum income. But what we're doing is we're saying, no, unless your labor is worth $15 an hour, you're not allowed to work in Rhode Island. And that is abhorrent. That is not something that's acceptable. It's an attack on the poor, and it's draped in the flag of like fighting poverty. No, it's a war on poor people. It's not the war on poverty. If you want to fight poverty, we have to let people get their feet on the lowest rungs so they can climb that ladder, right? And when you have a minimum wage, what you're doing is you're removing the lowest rungs from the ladder. So only people that are able to jump up high are able to move forward in life. We cannot do that. So I'm against the minimum wage raising. I don't think that the minimum wage here in Rhode Island is overly onerous for the economy right now because inflation is so high. $15 really isn't much anymore. So, I mean, if it was $15 an hour a few years back, I would have said that's too high. It's going to cause serious problems in Rhode Island's economy. Right now, I don't think it's a terrible burden.
Do you support lowering taxes like the sales and gas tax?
Yeah, I mean, I would try to lower taxes as much as humanly possible anywhere I can. We get taxed. I think it was something like they read off the stats, I think, at the debate, but the sound in the back was a little difficult. I think it was something like 49th or something highest taxes inside the country. Or it's 42nd, I forget what it was, but it was up there, right? And the point is that it's like, guys, Rhode Island doesn't have an income, but like the government here isn't taking in too little money. It's just spending way too much money. And I think that a perfect example of that is education, right? Where we're spending over $20,000 per student, right? And that's an average between high schoolers and kindergartners. And so it's not a real average, right? Because kindergartners are way cheaper per year than high school students, right? So high school students, it's way more than 20,000, but we'll just say it's $20,000 a year, right? And then if you say the average class size is 20, again, every teacher in Rhode Island would love to have only 20 students, right? But just so the math is easy and so that I'm giving the system the most benefit of the doubt I possibly can, right? That's $400,000 that is put aside per classroom per year, right? So if we gave a teacher, right now teachers make $70,000 a year. If we gave a teacher $400,000 per year, you just said, teach this class, Like you have to get your materials, you have to, you know, you have this $400,000 budget to teach this class. Teachers would make a lot more money, right? One, and then two, like we would have the best, most robust education system in the country. Right now, school lunches are like $2.75, right? Like my opponent Hurwitz, he's talking about giving free school lunches to every Rhode Islander. But I'm afraid that he's thinking about raising taxes in order to do that. We don't have to raise taxes. We just have to use the money that we already have. $400,000. Like if we doubled the price of school lunches and gave them all away for free, so we double the quality, that's only $9,000 a year. Where's the rest of this money going? $70,000 for the teacher. Let's add up their benefits. Let's say it's double, more than double. We'll say it's $150,000. That's $250,000 on the table, and we can't give them free lunches. We can't give them better lunches than what they're getting right now for free. You're crazy. Like there's basic math shows that there's some serious problems the way that we're spending money on education. It's not the teacher's fault. They're doing the best that they can. They would do a much better job managing this budget than whoever's been doing it. The Democrats and Republicans, they're playing with the numbers behind the scenes and making sure that their friends are getting paid off.
I'm glad you brought up education. Well, one of my questions was going to be what specific reforms would you favor, but it sounds like you did mention some of them. But I'm going to ask about the funding formula, since that's another hot topic when we talk about how we spend our money for education in Rhode Island. How do you feel about the Rhode Island's current funding formula for education?
Honestly, I don't know what the formula is. I've tried to look it up. Those numbers are very difficult to find online. I don't know if you have the numbers.
I don't necessarily have the numbers because the budget's very, very hard to find. I remember you had mentioned that at the debate, but typically they at least candidates in Providence talk about we're adjusting it so it will actually help kids in Providence. Is there any other commentary you'd have about it?
Look, I mean, so I mentioned it at the debate. I'm a big fan of school choice, right? And Arizona just passed a landmark legislation that's allowing students to leave their districts and go seek education elsewhere. It's a voucher system. And what happens with the voucher system is that we fund students and we don't just, and the money follows the student. So we're not just funding institutions, right? A basic free market principle is that competition is very important to pricing mechanisms and for quality control. If you have a poor product, right, and you have competition, people will choose the other product. But if your price starts going too high, people will start choosing lower quality. So things balance out, right? And that's how the consumer gets the best of quality and price, right? But when you have a system like we have, where wherever you live is where you have to go to school, unless you have tons of money to dish out. And by the way, it's not even tons of money. The private education places inside the institutions in Rhode Island are cheaper to run than our public ones, right? So like, I have old numbers for LaSalle and Hendricken, right? But these are much better performing high schools than most of Rhode Island public schools. Probably all, right? I don't know the exact numbers, but they're much higher performing. They operate like per year, I think tuition is like 75% of what it costs to send a student to Mount Pleasant, for instance, right? So imagine having a voucher. You're a student at Mount Pleasant, right? And you're forced to go there, but your family's poor, right? So you get a voucher in the mail or it's not really in the mail, but you have a voucher where you can just go to LaSalle Academy and say, hey, I want to come to LaSalle Academy. This is my voucher. And it's like 75% of that voucher is paid. The government saves money, right? So the government doesn't have to spend the full $21,000, the $22,000 it would spend at Mount Pleasant. Instead, it spends $18,000 at LaSalle Academy, and that student gets better education. This is how school choice works. It's better for everybody. And then once people start realizing, oh, wow, there's this system that actually benefits organizations that provide quality educations, we're going to have better schools popping up. And then schools that aren't being run so well will be incentivized to start improving. And then maybe, just maybe, places like Central High and Mount Pleasant won't be considered such bad places to send your children, right? So this is how we improve education, right? Is through school choice.
Gonna do a couple quick lightning round questions. Shorter. 1 to 2 word at most, one sentence. Starting off, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I'm pro-life, but as governor, I would never make abortion illegal. I don't believe that abortion should ever be made illegal.
In regard to LEABOR, the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, should it be repealed, reformed, or kept the same?
I probably appealed. I mean, officers should not have any special rights.
Do you support or oppose a constitutional amendment for right to public education?
I oppose that.
Do you support or oppose Rhode Island's voter ID law?
I support that.
And lastly, for lightning round, if you're elected, who out of the 3 lieutenant gubernatorial candidates would you prefer to work with?
Honestly, I haven't even been following the lieutenant governor. I'm not gonna pretend like I know. I have no idea which ones. I guess whichever one wins, I'd prefer to work with that one.
No worries. It did get kind of under the radar compared to CD2 in the governor's race, so I understand totally. I have a more of an open-ended question. A lot of people have misconceptions about third-party candidates in general, and whenever I have the third-party candidates on, I always like to allow them to answer this question. What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about candidates such as yourself?
Well, as a one, it's that it's a wasted vote, right? It's not a wasted vote. Your vote is telling people who you would prefer to win, right? And so the Libertarian Party, for instance, people say that the Libertarian Party never wins. That's completely untrue. First off, we have hundreds of elected officials across the country. We have Jeff Hewitt is the a county commissioner in Riverside County in California. He's one of 5 people that control a $5.5 billion budget, right? Like, we have elected officials across the board, but also libertarians are winning in other ways, right? So the Libertarian Party has been championing the legalization of cannabis and other drugs, right, since 1972. And because we brought this topic to the discussion, we brought the subject to the discussion, right? Slowly, we've been changing people's minds about it, right? And we didn't really even see any real movement until Ron Paul, who was a Republican at the time, but he's a longtime libertarian. He ran for president as a libertarian in 1988, right? When Ron Paul in 2012 was in the debates, he was talking about how that we need to end the drug war. And after that, we started actually seeing, because his ideas that stem from libertarianism, he's a libertarian, right? He started pushing the needle, where then a lot of Democrats start saying, you know what, we should pick this up. And that's when we start seeing these dominoes of legalization across the country. And now we just have the president of the United States actually say simple possession shouldn't be punished, right? And so that's fantastic. Another thing is for instance, gay marriage. Libertarians were pro-gay marriage in 1972. We had people fighting for it. Our first presidential nominee was a gay man, right? And his running mate was a Jewish woman. In 1972, a woman was running for vice president, and she, you know what? They actually received an electoral college vote because somebody didn't want to vote for whoever they were supposed to, and they actually put the woman's name down and not the top of the ticket down. So she was the first woman, and until Hillary Clinton ran in 2016, she was the first woman and the only woman to have received an electoral college vote for president, right? So that's fantastic. Rhode Island has been pushing these types of things. We've always been about individual liberty since the beginning of the party 50 years ago, right? And so we talk about these things, we bring up these issues. I'm talking about the drug war now in Rhode Island, and hopefully just this conversation and other conversations like it will start leading to some dominoes where people start getting released from prison, right, and sent home to their families, like, because it's horrible what we're doing.
Yeah, libertarians have quite the history. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was Governor Gary Johnson, when he was governor of New Mexico, was he a libertarian at the time? I know he ran for president as a libertarian.
He's a Republican, and he was actually in that same primary as a Republican as Ron Paul in 2012. But after he dropped out, after he lost basically the primary, he switched over to libertarian. He's always been libertarian philosophically, but he was never a libertarian before that. Yeah.
Gotcha. My final question, excuse me. My final question, it's a non-political topic. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Best known for?
Yep, in your opinion.
Family Guy, which is unfortunate. I've traveled around a lot. People always ask me like if I'm from Quahog, and I'm like, oh. But honestly, what it should be known for is food. Rhode Island has the best food for the best prices. It's not even for the best prices. We have the best food and the best prices, right? The food here is top notch. I always tell people while I'm traveling the country, like, they'll be like, oh, I've never been to Rhode Island. I'll be like, well, you should. Providence is one of the best restaurant scenes. It's not just Providence, so many other places. One of my favorite restaurants is Madeiras in East Providence, Portuguese restaurant. Fantastic. So yeah.
Absolutely. We have an amazing culinary scene. The Family Guy comparison, it does get a bit annoying, but it gives us a little bit of national exposure. And it's cool as a Rhode Islander when you see those little Easter eggs, like the news anchor is actually based off of Gene Valicenti. I remember somebody posted a side-by-side photo on Twitter, and I lost it. It was so funny to see that. But it's also very cool because we get some national attention. Elijah, thank you so much for giving me your time today. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure of mine to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.